Shortly after Jacob left Fifth Heaven on Snowflake, three figures flew to a small hill near the ethereal summit. "Hello, Elder Tate, Elder Family," a middle-aged man wearing a blue robe bowed at the other two. The pretty woman, who was referred to as Elder Emily, smiled at the middle-aged man. "Hello, Elder Hans," she greeted. They were masters of three cultivation sects near the ethereal summit. The positions of their three sects formed a triangle, and Jacob's ethereal summit was in the center of this triangle. From the terrains and the mountains, the three sects all regarded this valley as part of their back mountain. The three sects had argued over the ownership of the valley and finally decided to hold a competition once every decade. During the competition, each sect would send 3 new Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators, and the winner would gain the right to use the valley for 5 years. In the next 5 years, the valley would be left alone to recover its essence for the next winning sect. Of course, with this method, no sect could occupy this valley for 10 consecutive years, which could increase their power by so much that it would permanently occupy the valley. However, to prepare for the next competition, some disciples went into the valley, and they found a cave in it. The 3 masters were stunned by this discovery. They abided by their agreement and nurtured the valley for 5 years. Now, it was occupied by an outsider. This incident soon escalated. After some discussion, the 3 sects eliminated the possibility that one of the 3 sects had been secretly using the valley, and they sent a large group of young disciples and several elders to guard the valley. However, 2 shadows appeared in the sky above the valley in the evening, and the elders and hundreds of disciples who were waiting for the intruder were beaten unconscious and tossed out of the valley. During the whole process, none of the hundreds of cultivators saw the faces of the attackers. Receiving the message, the 3 sects held an emergency meeting. They sent all the masters in the core formation realm and the sects to the entrance of the valley, but they received the same treatment. This time, dozens of masters were tossed out of the valley, and all their high-quality flying swords were confiscated. With the failed night raid, the 3 sects didn't dare to make another move. After one uneasy night, the 3 elders decided to pay a visit to the valley during the daytime. "Let's go." Elder Hans took the lead and flew towards the valley on a red sword. The other 2 elders exchanged a look and followed him on their swords. From the information they got yesterday, the cultivator who occupied the valley only came there to cultivate at the night. The cave was empty during the day. That's why they thought it was safe to investigate it during the daytime. As he came near the edge of the valley, Elder Hans slowed down, and Elder Tate and Elder Emily didn't dare to break in either. After all, they were still stunned by the fact that dozens of masters were instantly beaten unconscious and tossed out of the valley last night. Senior Hans, the elder of 7 Star Sect, asked for permission to see you. Standing on his flying sword at the entrance of the valley, Elder Hans circulated his nature essence and spoke in a loud voice. He called the unknown intruder Senior out of respect, as they were sure that this could only be the job of a high-level master. They waited for a long while, and no reply came from the valley. Looking back at the other 2 elders, Elder Hans hesitated for a few seconds and called out again. "If Senior is not in here, please forgive us for going into the valley." No sounds came from the valley, not even the chirping of birds. The quieter the valley was, the more nervous they got. Elder Hans inhaled deeply and looked back at Elder Tate and Elder Emily. "Let's go in together." In fact, Elder Tate and Elder Emily were nervous, but they couldn't back off now. Besides, from the incidents of the last few nights, they knew that the senior living in the valley didn't want to hurt anyone. He or she just wanted to keep people out. Each equipped with a protective treasure, they forced themselves to fly into the valley. A wave of mist greeted them. When they regained their sense of orientation, they realized that they were outside the valley. Not wanting to admit defeat, they flew in front another direction. When the mist disappeared, they found themselves back at the entrance of the valley. They didn't dare to try again. Standing on their flying swords, they looked at each other in puzzlement. "Elder Hans, will we just give the valley up to this outsider?" Elder Emily broke the silence and asked with a reluctant expression on her face. To prepare for this competition, she had personally trained 3 disciples with the determination of getting control of the valley, and that was why she was unwilling to let go. Elder Hans thought for a moment and said, "I don't think the senior is in the valley now, or he or she would have come out and dealt with us instead of letting us linger out here." "And the array formation?" Elder Tate asked with bafflement. "The array formation left in the Elixir King Valley should be a position-shifting array. We can't go in if we can't break the array. In our 7-star sect, we have a similar array formation, but this one is much more advanced than ours." Elder Hans paused for a few seconds before continuing. "Since the senior won't be back until nighttime, we can just wait here. The cave was reported to be very crude. I think it might be a temporary resting place for the senior. We can leave them alone, and the senior will probably leave after a while, Elder Tate said after a moment of consideration. The sects in Fifth Heaven knew the limits of their strength. Sometimes cultivators from Sixth Heaven would come to visit Fifth Heaven, and they couldn't afford to mess with these Sixth Heaven cultivators. However, Elder Hans shook his head. The senior must be a cultivator from Sixth Heaven, and he or she is living here temporarily to recover from injuries or to hunt for treasures. From the way our cultivators were dealt with last night, the senior is not a murderous person. This may present an opportunity for us. Hearing Elder Hans' words, Elder Emily's eyes lit up with understanding. With a master from Sixth Heaven living in the Elixir King Valley, it was both a threat and an opportunity for the three sects nearby. Even if we couldn't get any treasures or cultivation techniques from the senior, it would benefit the sects if the senior could give us a few tips on cultivation. Elder Hans must have planned to ask the senior for tips, but he was afraid to do it alone, and that's why he wanted the three of us to act together, Elder Emily thought to herself. Then we will wait here and hope that we can meet this senior today, Elder Tate nodded and said. Elder Tate didn't hope to get cultivation tips from this senior. He only wanted the senior to return the flying swords that were confiscated last night. After all, his sect had sent out the largest number of cultivators last night and thus suffered the most significant loss of flying swords. While the three elders waited respectfully near the valley, Jacob, the senior in their eyes, was back in the university having classes. With Liam's special permission, Jacob could skip any class he wanted, but the teacher still couldn't let him pass the course if he did too poorly on the exams. If he failed too many courses, Jacob wouldn't be able to explain it to his parents. More importantly, if he failed miserably on the exams, he would be too shameful to tutor Sophie. While Jacob was listening to the teacher attentively, Ryan, sitting next to him, leaned towards him, slowly to look at the item on his wrist. "Ooh, this bracelet's so beautiful." Jacob was sitting in the back row close to the window. Under the sunlight shining through the window, the blue, deep ocean crystal was dazzling. The golden thread that was attaching the crystal to his wrist was also emitting light that was more dazzling than gold. "What are you doing?" Jacob bounced Ryan's head off with the back of his fist. "You've been wearing a lot of accessories lately." Ryan leaned towards him again and said, "Susan once gave you 2 bracelets. Then you got a necklace, a golden bell, some beads, and now you got this little star? Where are you getting all this? From girls?" Jacob didn't know how to answer him. "You're so lucky. No girl's ever given me gifts." Ryan sighed heavily. "Okay, I'll give you a gift next time," Jacob said in exasperation. "No need. I don't want your pity gifts." Ryan made a face and turned back. Last time, when he was at the trading convention on Fifth Heaven, he had bought some gems with some spirit stones. They would sell for a fortune at any jewelry store, and he planned to give one to Ryan. But he changed his mind when he saw his friend being so dramatic about it. After morning classes ended, Kathy walked to Jacob's side with a small bag on her back. "Lunch is on me today? Let's go." "Why?" Jacob was baffled. "I have good news," she told him excitedly.